take a while. And this is how you come down. This is a serious game trail right here. Major game trail. Camera's on it. These trees fell over it, but let me know if something's coming from behind me. Alright. Some relaxed time, finally. Too much of a ripper the past few days, past couple weeks. I think I actually exhausted myself before I left, so unfortunate. Got a bug in the lens? Come on. Anyway. Oops. I think I learned a lesson. It's when I do a trip like this, when you arrive exhausted, you should make it mandatory to take one day off and relax and get caught in sleep. Because I was screwing up left, right, and center. Forgetting this, losing that. I lost that, I misplaced this. It's just a frickin' mess. Right to the point this morning, I got this $600 frickin' jacket. Brand new for hunting and hunting remote. Backpacking. And I even lost that and my rain gear this morning in the dark, heading to a spot. And then we come back. I'm like, what's out in the road? It's my jacket and my frickin' rain pants sitting in the middle of the road the whole day. Thankfully nobody came by and scooped it up. And I'm like, okay, that's it. Time to sleep. Time to sleep. So, got the afternoon, I had a real good nap. I'm gonna get some voices heard, because I can, while I sit on this game trail with my back to it. And it's been quite a challenge. We got fairly lucky but unlucky the very first day. Probably saw that video I posted on the How to Hunt channel. I'll put the link in the community channel on this channel. And heard a bull screaming right off the bat and got lucky and went into absolute, it's the thickest nightmare jungle you could ever imagine. Regrowth, willow, and small pine for miles. There's just tunnels of trails in there, but you can't see more than 10 yards. And then where there is a little bit of an opening is waist-high grass and tangle. And anything can circle around you in that nightmare and get downwind and tell you where you are. Anyways, got lucky, got a bull within 12 yards, and poor Gavin missed him. His scope was full of rain on both sides. New hunter, all good. We'll get it back. So last night we set up on a peak over here on the top of this mountain and overlooked a valley, and I watched about 18 elk come out of the forest and down into that nightmare regrowth. There's just no telling where they are. But without a bugling elk, you're just not going to get them. You're not even going to see them. I did get lucky and saw 2 elk today on foot while I was slithering along solo. But if those bulls are not going to speak and be verbal in that jungle, you're not going to get one. And it's downtime right now. They are absolutely quiet. But they'll fire up again. We'll get it back. And then the power pack that I have. And I actually bought a generator to charge up instead of solar. How we're going to be camped this particular trip. I forgot the frickin' cable that has to be plugged in to charge the battery pack. Oh my god. That is what I was going to use to pack the Starlink on the quad, so I could stream everything. But luckily, there's two different spots where I do have enough service to match up my phone to the GoPro and stream, which I have. So, who knows? We'll see how it goes. But I might take a road trip and drive to the next town and get some stuff we need, possibly. Anyway, enough of the babble. Should have brought some bug repellent. This is titled, these are fairly recent, two out of the recent inbox, right? Big Fellow Racing a Train. The story that I'm sharing is not actually mine. It came from a good friend who has now passed on. John Kimmons, Kimmons, was a veteran and knew a lot more than he ever spoke aloud. He grew up in western Tennessee around Paris in Benton County. He was that mix we see so often in the South, Celtic and Cherokee. He grew up hunting and fishing and spent many years in Alaska, where he hunted and for a time was a professional fisherman. When he was a child, his daddy got a job working for the railroad, shoveling coal into the engine. Times were tough, and there was a large family to provide for. On the route his father ran was a section of wild, swampy land. One day, as his dad, nicknamed Red for his hair color, was bent over shoveling the coal, the engineer tapped him on the shoulder and pointed out the window. Running beside the train was a huge, hairy man moving at an impossible speed over terrain no human could navigate. Both men paused and watched the amazing race. Finally, the train pulled away and left the runner behind. The engineer yelled in Red's ear, quote, "I didn't see anything and you didn't either. We're not going to lose our jobs over this," end quote. Many years later, Red shared this with his son, John. In honor of the both, I am now sharing it with you. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. My name is Rebecca Carter. Rebecca, absolutely appreciate you sharing that tidbit. Absolutely appreciate that. I don't know what it is, just for me personally, I really perk up when I hear anyone involved with the railroad emailing in. I think possibly because I've walked train tracks into remote BC numerous times, and I realize how easy it is to come up on wildlife. Not talking about these people, and I do not refer to these bush people as wildlife, far from it. But I realize just how much life you see and sights that people do not see on the railroads. I think I probably would have loved that job. Well, physically I wouldn't have loved the job, but for the adventure of seeing, I would have absolutely been glued to the front window of any train if I could have had a job doing that, especially at nighttime. Except when the unfortunate happens in the wintertime, wiping out animals. But anyway, thanks again, Rebecca, and don't forget, I'm always asking all of you out there, and I know you're here, who work for railroad companies, railroad inspectors. I know you've seen these people in the bush. I know you have. A lot more than's coming forward. We have a lot come forward, but I know there is no way. I wonder what the percentage is of either conductors or railroad and rail inspectors. I wonder the percentage is of those people in that field who have seen these people in the bush. I'm willing to bet heavy is right up there. So on that note, I know you guys are here. Email us in, alright? Share my story at howtohunt.com. Email us in what you got, okay? It's time. You're safe. It's a safe place to do it. Alright, next up, mosquitoes are coming at me. Thanks and Washington State encounters, several rather long. How long is this? Doesn't seem too long to me. I'm going in. Steve, first of all, thanks for all you do on the Sasquatch subject and removing the veil of BS and clearing the way for the truth. No problem. It could be done with people like you. I am Eric, and I live on Whidbey Island in Washington. And I grew up in the Cascades, skiing, hiking, and camping with my parents. And the subject of Bigfoot was always kind of just a campfire story that nobody took seriously. My grandfather was a civil engineer who, after the war, built a fair number of bridges and roads in the interior of Alaska, and later was head of logging operations for a Scott Paper Company. I think could have been Georgia Pacific. Either way, it was based out of Seattle/Everett, and he ran camps on Vancouver Island, up by Campbell River, and eventually ran the camp in Lester, Washington. I think he was in charge for 15 to 20 years. He passed a few years ago, but he was an avid outdoorsman and always had hunting and fishing stories from his time in the woods. However, anytime I asked him about the Sasquatch topic, it was instantly and coldly shut down and always laughed it off, which to me was rather curious, as he always had something to say when you asked him a question. I never thought much of it then, just kind of left it with that. But looking back on it now, it makes me wonder. I could never get him to even consider going. I could never get him to even consider going hunting or camping. Although we would go fishing any chance we got, whether it was in Mexico for marlin or Alaska for kings, or even just the local rivers and bays here in Washington. He had trophy elk antlers on his cabin, but couldn't even get him to shoot ducks. So, perhaps something happened that he shut out of his life completely and killed the sport for him. I never had the answers. Sounds curious to me. He probably hitting the nail on the head. Anyway, I'm going to attempt to keep the subject on track, as I have a tendency to ramble and lose the flow, but here it goes. Oh, I get you. I personally have had multiple encounters in several areas, and know what I saw, with nothing to hide, and no reason to care what others think or say because they simply were not there, but have no reason to share road names, locations, time of year. I'm an open book when it comes to what I've seen. I was never allowed to handle guns beyond the odd BB gun as a kid. My dad to this day is anti-gun, although he was an officer in the Air Force and grew up with the aforementioned grandfather. His dad and my mom's dad was a hunter. To this day, she cringes at the thought of eating game meat. It's funny how many people are anti-guns when they should be anti-criminals. Sorry. When my mother's father passed, I inherited his firearm collection, which was rather modest, but are now some of my prized possessions. I was always interested in hunting, and when I turned 18, I enrolled in hunter safety, got my license, and began pursuing the sport. For my high school graduation, my grandmother, mom's side, let me go pick out my first decent vehicle. And after many months of tests, drives, and research, I found my Black Betty 2001 Jeep Wrangler, which I've now had for almost 15 years. I knew nothing about Jeeps or trucks or anything at that time, and only later, once I moved out on my own with my first girlfriend, we started exploring camping, snowboarding, fishing, and hunting together, and began to spend lots of time in the woods. Sometimes, as far into the back country as we could get, and it would not be uncommon to be first tracks up into some areas at the beginning of the seasons, and sometimes some of the last people off the mountain as the snow lines drop dramatically, which really plays into when I first started seeing these beings. It all started in 2008, when my girlfriend at the time and I were dating. We'd go snowboarding up on Mount Baker as much as we could in the winter and in the spring/summer. Started exploring the logging roads, and that fall got into grouse hunting. We were living in Anacortes and exploring the Mount Baker area off of Highway 542 as much as we could. There was no logging road about halfway up the switchbacks on Baker, about 20 minutes before the ski area, and we would start our grouse hunt there, but always had this weird, ominous feeling. And we never strayed too far from the Jeep. A few weeks later, after some research online, we found out about the Winchester Mountain Fire Tower Lookout, which is a first-come, first-served fire tower on the peak of a 6,600-foot mountain you can stay in. So, We decided to go up to the trailhead, as there are 2 lakes at the top, and the name of the road is Twin Lakes Road / NF-3065, and that's where it all began. We'd occasionally take a side road a little while, pull off, hop out, poke around for an hour or so for grouse. We come to one point about halfway up the mountain to one such place, and then we hiked probably a quarter of a half a mile past the end of this little spur off the main road we took. And it was here where we found a campsite. However, it was no normal campsite, as everything was still there. Although scattered, trashed, and destroyed, it looked like it was left over from the spring, or even perhaps the summer before. It was rather spooky, as it looked as if a bear came through and destroyed the camp with the campers away, except for the fact their things were thrown up into the trees. The tent was shredded. Nothing was clawed up as if a bear were there. Cans of food were smashed. Smashed camp stove. Trampled tent with broken and split poles. It was eerie. Once we realized it did not have the telltale signs of a bear, we assumed that the campers likely had a bad drug trip. Perhaps there are too many psychedelics or smoked too much and crank, as that's about all that made sense to us at the time. And we got out of there and returned to the rig and continued up the mountain. We were scratching our heads the rest of the day and stopped hunting decided just to get up to Twin Lakes and check it out. We got to the top without incident, but we're the only rig we saw all day, with the exception of one Subaru earlier around noon. It was mid-September, early October. The light was just starting to fade when we got to the top. It was snowing hard and was gray, almost whiteout conditions at the top. Now, Twin Lakes Road has been referred to before as the worst maintained road in Washington by several hiking groups, and realistically is only accessible half the year or less due to the snowpack. We decided it was time to head home, probably being 3:30 in the afternoon, and still had a 2-hour drive ahead of us. So we got back in the Jeep, rallied down the mountain, stopping once to check out the creek about 2/3 the way down. We found some prospecting tailings and loaded up a bucket of samples before getting back on the road. We loaded up, continued on, when we saw it. The road has a sweeping double S curve to it, and in the parallax of vision, something about 8 to 9 foot tall cleared the road in one stride, from one side to the other, with only 1 foot touching the middle of the road from right to left. And this is probably 30-40 feet in front of my Jeep, and we were probably going 25 to 30 miles per hour, so it happened very quickly. But we stopped right at the point where this thing cleared the road and drove back and dove back into the brush. We rolled down our windows and tried to get a look at whatever it was. My girlfriend and I looked at each other with blank stares and asked each other, what the F was that, almost in unison. When the brush off to our left started crashing and thrashing about, hearing loud trampling footsteps. And it was at that point we realized we just saw a Sasquatch. I dropped that Jeep of mine into gear and peeled the hell out of there. We know what we saw, but nobody believed us, and got the typical responses. The following summer we went back in the Jeep, but couldn't make it up to the top of the lakes as the snowpack was still too deep, and just turned around and went about our day. However, we did have the top down in my Jeep and noticed a very interesting smell in the woods, a pungent, wet dog, musky, rot to the air, smell to the air, and just kept going. And shortly after, later that summer, the gal and I split and hadn't really talked since. It was 2010 at this point, and the economy absolutely was in the trash. I was a marine diesel mechanic and boat builder at the time, and the majority of the boat shops here in town closed down. I found myself without a job. I had a buddy who had a friend who owned a commercial fishing boat, and I needed work, so I started fishing. First it was just gill netting, Puget Sound, then crabbing on the coast. But after not getting paid in 3 months, the whole crew quit, and it was time to find a new boat. I hope you drowned the captain. Spring of 2011, I found myself in Cordova, Alaska, on a 104-foot Bering Sea crabber, tending tendering salmon in Prince William Sound, where I spent the entire summer. I was overly curious about the Sasquatch topic and was shamelessly asked around, getting all sorts of answers, but the ones that stood out was asking one fisherman to be told they saw one running down the beach, Gavina Inlet, 9 hours outside Cordova, which interestingly was near an ancient native site where there was a small cabin and outbuildings, some sort of old hunting camp or something. I later asked a native in town about the subject and was told straight up they don't exist. Others would say, quote, "We don't talk about that," end quote. All in all, I'd get shut down any time I bring up the topic, as if there was this impenetrable lid on the topic, the subject. Then again, I was just some fresh 23-year-old kid poking around, not understanding the subject in its entirety. I could see that. I could see you getting turned away. Unfortunately, right? You always got to check your back when you're in the middle of a game trail, right? We even found a bear paw half-eaten while grouse hunting ashore that I mistakenly dubbed a Sasquatch foot, which I still have photos to this day, and that was always fun to show off at the bar and freak people out with. I didn't recognize it as a bear paw at the time, so I thought I actually found something. I still have the photos if you'd like the final word on that. Excuse me, but a few fishing seasons later, I showed the photos to a local hunter in Cordova when I was told it was from a bear. All in all, I ended up doing 9 commercial fishing seasons up in Alaska, crabbing the Bering Sea in the dead of the winter, seining southeast, gill netting, trolling. I tried it all, satisfying my curiosity. I got out of the industry 4 years ago, but never ever quite got the vibes I had like my first time at Cordova with the reactions I got whenever I asked about the subject. Yeah, and just, well, you probably know Cordova, there's a lot of brown bear hunts going on in Cordova. A lot of outfitters are in Cordova. I know a couple of them actually. A lot of them go up there for brown bear hunting. So I'd imagine there's no shortage of paws laying around. At the end of the season. Sorry. It was about 5 years ago when I went back to Mount Baker for an end-of-season camping trip, which for me, it is rather rare to stay in a campground as I have a Jeep. Outfitters tents, spike tents with stoves, all sorts of gear. But we figured we would just get out and away and left the Jeep at home and stayed on pavement. But I couldn't resist going back up Twin Lakes Road. After telling the story about my first encounter, we took our sedan up the road just a little bit, pulling off to what looked like a quarry pit. I let the dog out and just kind of walked around. Now, if you look at a map of where this area is, you'll notice there's a creek coming from Twin Lakes called Swamp Creek, which dumps into the Nooksack River right across from the campground where we stayed at. In this quarry, there was an embankment about 5 feet high I climbed over, where, looking over the side, you can see a marshy, swampy wetlands along the creek heading back up the mountain. I kind of just stared off into the brush and then walked back to the car when I realized I was standing next to a set of footprints. I wear a size 12 boot, and these were easily size 16, 17, 18 or larger, coming out of the swamp, slowly fading as the mud turned to gravel. It was then I made the observation that this is probably a travel corridor for these creatures. Prior to that, we took my Jeep up I-90 to the Cle-Elum area, east of Seattle. In early May, where we took the Jeep as far up into the Salmon-La-Sac area as we could get, we stopped when we got stuck in the snow line. Again, first tracks. We didn't see any other rigs, nor tire tracks, nor signs of any other humans, so we decided to make camp next to the river, right near a series of fair-sized rapids. Needless to say, it was loud. Even my bird dog was having a problem hearing my calls, but it was an awesome campsite. So I set up my outfitter's tent and we stayed there a few days. My tent has a wood stove in it, which is very handy for camping in snow lines and greatly extends my season. I had another girlfriend with me. And after having some drinks, cooking dinner, usual camping stuff, we retired to the tent and went to bed. It was around 1:30 a.m. when the fire was getting low in the wood stove, so I went outside to split more firewood, and with each chop of my axe, there was something 150 yards or so up the opposite side of the mountain repeating my axe chops. I'd split a chunk of wood and something would go smack back up the mountain. I'd cut wood, it would answer back. All in all, about a dozen smacks coming from up that side of the mountain. I didn't tell my girlfriend, who was asleep in the tent, nor did I alert my then 4-year-old Vizsla bird dog. But I kept my 44 mag Ruger next to me the rest of the time we were up there. If you look at a map of where Salmon Lac is, in relation to the mountains and terrain, you will notice that if you continued on due north from where this happened, you would go up and over a small set of mountains leading to the Alpine Lakes Wilderness area, which is arguably the most scenic and pristine part of Washington. Thousands of square miles of unmolested forest with hundreds of fish-filled lakes, and on the other side of that is Highway 2 and the Stevens Pass area, with there being the main access road to the opposite side of where I was camping when I was wood knocked out while splitting firewood. Through a series of events and the passing of my grandfather, the logger, I ended up with an acre and a half at the base of this road. I had no knowledge of my property prior to receiving papers to it, but it is where I'm planning on building a house, being right on the river, the ski area 15 minutes away, and access to all those lakes and trails. Without dragging this on much more, I will say that one doesn't choose to see these creatures or have encounters with them, nor does one have the ability to stop having encounters, which I have come to accept the fact that they are part of life in the woods. They exist. I've seen them. You've seen them. I have friends that have seen them. I have a coworker who was fishing up at Port Renfrew probably 20 years ago and was sleeping in his tent up by some lake and had 3 of them screaming at him in the middle of the night. I have a coworker who was fishing up at Port Renfrew probably 20 years ago and was sleeping in his tent up by some lake and had 3 of them screaming at him in the middle of the night. Pissed off he was there. His wife ran into one mushroom picking, punctuation. His wife ran into one mushroom picking last spring up off the Suattle River Roads. That's S-U-S-A-U-K. S-U-I-A-T-T-L-E River, Roads General Area. This past October, a girl who went hiking alone on an overnight trip by Hamilton to Hidden Lake, where she disappeared without a trace. Been 6 months, no sign of her still. Okay, that's not necessarily the Sasquatch people, but it's very unfortunate either way, and that sucks. These creatures are probably the natural native heirs to this land, possibly predating even the First Nations peoples. I have an archery black bear hunt planned in August up in the Alpine with my buddy, who doesn't believe any of this stuff, but we will be going into the heart of these creatures' territory. Whatever happens, happens. It's just a part of life in the woods. At least that's how I see it. Anyway, good sir, I really appreciate the work you do and what you do for everybody out there, whether it be your hunting tutorial apps, the Sasquatch stuff, or just some damn good stories. Please keep it up. You are the voice of the movement to take this subject back from the people like Meldrum and the experts. Yeah, I think we've done it. The adventures have just begun, and I'm sure I will have many more encounters through my life. I'm 31, and I won't let anything keep me from chasing my love for the outdoors. I haven't spent much time in the woods in the last 2 years as I'd like. However, I've been rebuilding a sailboat and retrofitting it for the cruise to Alaska, as I plan on taking 6 months off and exploring the BC, Southeast, and Southeast on my own boat. And I'm more than certain I'll have more encounters and experiences. Thanks again, Steve. If you're ever in Skagit County, beer's on me, Eric Johnson. Okay, Eric? Enjoyed reading that, man. Envious you're living the life. Well, I guess I got to live it too, but I love hearing people going out and just giving her and taking all those adventure opportunities. Yeah. Welcome to the club, right? Yeah. I wonder how many people you will come across that'll give it up and admit to seeing or knowing of these people. Probably quite a few coming up, I'd imagine. There's no way getting out of it. This is big old growth behind me. This is what old growth looks like in the north. Never been logged here. This is monster moose, big elk, monster mule deer, and whitetail zone. Lots of grizzly bears, lots of grizzlies. But anyway, the lake in Port Renfrew. What lake would that have been? My brain's farting. No doubt it was a lake where you can canoe into the San Juan River directly from that lake. And that is just not too far. It might be 5 miles up from the edge of the ocean in Port Renfrew. And that's probably the lake your friend was getting screamed at. And Port Renfrew, that's British Columbia, guys. And just upriver from Port Renfrew is where my grandfather ran into that one. Gordon River dumps into Port Renfrew. There is so many sightings along Gordon River right around the Port Renfrew area. It's ridiculous. It's endless. Endless. But anyway. I forgot. I totally mentioned I was going to share with you guys something unrelated topic, but absolutely ridiculous, outrageous, and I'm going to share it just because. A lot of you donated to help my dear friend / family member with her cancer. And now listen to this story. This is just going to make you go, what the F? I just heard this on my way up. Getting ate by mosquitoes. Now, there's this scumbag. So my dear friends, they have a whole bunch of other dear friends, right? The whole circle, the small town, Pemberton, British Columbia, okay? And there are these two kids, siblings, a woman and a man who inherited their huge business. It's no secrets, it's all factual. Sabre Rentals, Sabre Excavating, from their father who built that business up in Whistler, and he died. And the daughter, I think she's got the excavating or whatever, the gravel trucks, and the brother, who's a super solid guy, he's got the rentals and everything. Great guy. Stressing on that, okay? I get this one. The husband of the sister, who owns the other half of Sabre, they were all friends with mutual friends of mine. Super kind people. This one girl, Jocelyn, super sweet, kind person. Well, if her teenage daughter wasn't getting molested by this woman's husband, okay? The woman who owns the other half of Sabre. You can look it up online. Now, he also was molesting other teenage daughters, and these were the daughters of all of the friends in the circle. Absolutely amazing. It was all that anybody could do not to go pull a vigilant act. The families of these girls, obviously everybody's going through hell. The daughters went through hell. They're still going through hell. They've gone through hell. Our one super kind soul friend, well, her marriage fell apart because of this, because of their daughter being molested by this absolute sick bastard. Okay, so I'm just painting the picture so you see the ridiculousness of what I'm going to share with you coming up. So, these people have these business Sabre, they got a lot of money. And get this one. The wife of the molester was trying to defend her diddler husband in the beginning. But now it's all said and done. He got convicted and they're divorced, okay? Now get this one. Just because whatever she's got on going between her ears, got a lot of money and not too many brains, she has retained a lawyer and is suing our dear friend who lost her marriage over this because her daughter got molested by the scumbag. She is suing her for not being the proper parent she should have been, and should have been protecting her child from her husband, and now none of this would have happened. What? Let me say that again. This psychopath, whose husband molested and trashed the lives of many, this psychopath is now lashing out because she's got too much money, no brains, and nothing but evil in her veins. She is going after and trying to sue the mother of one of the molested children because she should have been a better mother and should have protected her daughter from her husband. So it's her fault. You can't make this shit up. Who would you even try to vote off the island for that permanently? Would it be her, or would it be the lawyer that actually takes the case? What kind of a human being either lets something like this goes down is beyond me. But then again, if you look at all the tragic shit that's going on the planet today, it's almost, you're just numb to it now, don't you think? It's almost like, whatever. You're just numb to the insanity. There's so much insanity going on. But one thing I have noticed is, and I'm not saying this against all the good lawyers out there, but the insanity sure seems to be created by lawyers in the end. Does it not? Does it not? It's out of hand, man. Anyways, that's the story that I heard on my way up, and it was fresh in my mind, and I was wanting to scream it up from the mountaintops. I was going to share it with all you guys, and I said I was going to share it the next day, and I forgot to, so that's it. I shared it. That's what I was fired up about. Amazing. The wife of a molester is going to possibly successfully or attempt to sue the mother of the innocent children that were molested by her husband and trash what's remaining of her life. Can you get much more evil than that, do you think? Seriously. Can you get much more dark and evil than that? We need a good guy army bad. We need a real big, huge, good guy army in this world today. Tell you what, straighten out all this crazy shit and do away with all those dark, filthy, dirty people. Anyway, okay, moving along. On a positive note, I'm going back up to camp. I'm going to get all my gear on. I'm going to dive into the woods. I'm going to sit on a log, and I'm going to sit silently and wait for a herd of elk to come out of this mountain onto this grassy road like they did last night. Maybe I'll set up the camera and a tripod, and if I can, I might even stream some of it if I got enough reception. All right. So there you go. Finally got some more voices heard. Fight the darkness, you guys. Stand up for the weak. Fight for the weak. You have to. Just stand up for the weak and fight for the weak. Fight for good. Squash all this darkness. And if you got something you want to add to any of these places, I'm sure this last man that generously emailed in all of his ventures and all the places, I will bet you there's a pile of you out there that have been to all those places too. And I'll bet you there's a handful of you that have something to add. I wouldn't be surprised. So, share my story at howtohunt.com and you will get heard word for word.